Hey guys, tonight we're unraveling one of the most absurd tales ever to stumble out of a goblet Dionysus and the time he lost a drinking game to a donkey. You're standing in a vineyard at night, not a modern one with rows of tidy signage and irrigation pipes. This one's wild. Vines snake over crumbling marble ruins. Grapes hang heavy and glowing like forgotten moons, and the air smells like fermenting laughter. And there he is, Dionysus himself. No throne, no lightning bolts, just a god reclining on a tilted winepress, wearing a crown of ivy, and having a whispered argument with a fig. He waves at you lazily with a hand still stained purple from stomping grapes. "Welcome," he says, slurring just a little, "to the best mistake Olympus ever made. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where are you listening from, and what time is it right now where you are? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step closer. The ground is soft with crushed grape skins and spongy moss. Somewhere to your left, a flute is playing itself, and a disembodied giggle echoes through the olive trees. Dionysus is already rambling. "The vines grow best under a full moon," he murmurs. "Some say it's the tides. Others say it's the music. Personally, I think the grapes just want a good excuse." You nod as if that makes sense. "Because tonight, logic is optional." He gestures at the vineyard like a proud but mildly disappointed parent. "This place, it's where the whole mess begins and ends, and loops around like a satyr who forgot what he was chasing." You follow him deeper into the vines, where amphorae lie tipped over, oozing fragrant wine into little troughs that lead nowhere. It feels like you're walking through a party that peaked 6 centuries ago and never stopped. Mainstream historians agree Dionysus was one of the last Olympians to be officially worshipped, sneaking onto Mount Olympus like the god of gatecrashers. But unlike Zeus and his thunder tantrums, Dionysus brought wine and chaos and an unapologetic love for the ridiculous. "Do you know, I once turned a man into a fig tree just because he sneezed at my sandals?" Dionysus asks, snorting. "Even I can't remember if I meant to do that." You pause beside a statue. At first, it looks like a woman. Then you realize it's an ancient vinekeeper, mid-yawn, petrified in stone, her mouth still open like she's about to ask for a raise. That's when you realize the vineyard is full of these stone sleepers, dozens of them caught mid-burp, mid-waltz, mid-sip. Some say I curse them, Dionysus says with a shrug. Others say they just drank too much and forgot how to stand. Fringe archaeologists in the 1800s actually proposed that Dionysian cults practiced voluntary stoning, not the execution kind, the get high and sit so still you fossilize kind. No one could prove it. Then again, no one could disprove the wine gods either. Suddenly, Dionysus freezes. His eyes go wide. "Did you hear that?" He hisses. You strain to listen. All you hear is the hum of crickets and one frog that sounds mildly sarcastic. "Hera," he whispers. "She's still mad about the baby thing." You raise an eyebrow. "What baby thing?" And just like that, the vineyard melts into shadow and moonlight, and the god of wine begins to recount a birth so absurd even Zeus flinched. Imagine this. Dionysus says, weaving through gnarled vines like a sleepy tour guide, a mortal woman falls for Zeus because of course she does. He shows up disguised as a really convincing eagle. Then Hera finds out. Classic drama. You duck under a low-hanging branch dripping with overripe grapes. One explodes on your shoulder like a sugary landmine. She demands Zeus show himself in all his divine glory. Dionysus continues, now swaying slightly, so he does. She explodes. I mean, literally explodes. Poof! Mortals don't handle lightning well. Historians still argue whether Semile's explosion was metaphorical or actually described in early cult mythos. Dionysus adds, with a wine-soaked grin, either way, it was messy. And so, the fetus that would become Dionysus half-immortal, fully inconvenient, had nowhere to go. Zeus, brilliant problem solver that he is, slices open his own thigh and tucks the baby inside like a divine kangaroo pouch. You gag slightly at the image. Why the thigh? You ask. Dionysus shrugs. Apparently the armpit was full. You both stumble into a clearing where a half-built shrine leans sideways. Like even the stones couldn't stay sober. Moss curls up the walls in spirals that look suspiciously like fingerprints. Anyway, Dionysus says, lowering himself onto a barrel with a sigh, I was reborn. From Zeus's leg, I don't recommend it. You sit down beside him. The night has deepened. Somewhere far off, a donkey brays twice. You don't know it yet, but that sound will come back to haunt Dionysus. And you, and maybe Western civilization. But for now, the vineyard is quiet. The stars are pulsing gently overhead. And the god of wine is already nodding off, murmuring something about dancing goats and a misdelivered prophecy. You let your eyes close for a second. It's going to be a long night. You open your eyes just as a vine curls lazily around your ankle. Not in a threatening way, more like it's trying to hold your hand, or remind you where you left off. Dionysus stretches beside you, yawns dramatically, and begins speaking like nothing ever paused. So yes, the leg birth, he says, scratching behind his ear with a corkscrew. Zeus had never done something that weird before, which is saying something. The vineyard flickers. The trees fade into a marble chamber dripping with gold and gilt. And you're suddenly inside a throne room on Mount Olympus, staring at Zeus's freshly sewn thigh like it's a cursed fruitcake. You try not to stare too hard. Hera is storming around the room, flinging lightning pebbles at minor gods and muttering about that mortal girl with the smoky eyes. Aphrodite's trying not to laugh. Apollo's pretending he didn't hear anything. Hermes is selling popcorn from a bag he just invented. And then it happens. With the messiness of a biology experiment nobody consented to, Dionysus is born again, not from a womb, but from a divine incision, stitched up with star thread and denial. Was I fully grown? No. Was I adorable? Absolutely. Dionysus mutters beside you, watching the whole thing unfold like a director rewatching his own awkward pilot episode. You peer at the newborn god, who looks less like a newborn and more like a small, confused theater major. His first action, sneezing wine bubbles into Zeus's beard. Now that's legacy. Historically speaking, this peculiar birth gave Dionysus a rare duality. He's both mortal and divine, both born and reborn. Some scholars even call him the twice-born, which sounds impressive until you learn it was mostly used to excuse his unpredictable behavior. But Hera wasn't buying it. She wanted the baby gone. Again, permanently. And since divine lightning hadn't worked, she went old school, hit squads and hexes. So, baby Dionysus was hidden, not in a cave, not on a mountain, but with goats. You blink. Goats. You ask? Yes. Dionysus nods. A lovely forest nymph named Macris and her goat, Amalthea. Best milk I ever had. Not that I remember, but I remember the cheese. You're now crawling through a mossy glade in ancient Nysa, where time runs sideways and naps count as religious practice. Baby Dionysus is wobbling after a frog. The goat bleats protectively and chews on a sandal that might belong to a very confused satyr. Fringe mythologists argue that Dionysus was raised not just by goats and nymphs, but possibly by a wild bee colony that taught him the secrets of mead. No hard evidence, of course, but cave walls in Arcadia have honeycomb-shaped carvings that nobody can quite explain. Those bees were intense. Dionysus says, if you fell asleep in the wrong spot, they'd build a shrine on you. You pass through a grove where young Dionysus is learning to shape vines with his thoughts. He frowns and accidentally strangles a tree. The nymphs applaud anyway. They were very supportive. He mutters. One day, a passing traveler stumbles into their hidden world. A mortal bard with a broken lute and no sense of direction. He becomes Dionysus's first real friend. They teach each other songs, dance barefoot on moss, and invent a game involving figs and elaborate compliments. Historians still argue whether this bard was real. Dionysus notes, watching the scene with a rare softness. Some say it was Orpheus in disguise. Some say it was just me talking to a tree. You follow him into a hidden glen, where an altar of carved grapes glistens under beams of dreamlike sun. There's no temple, just joy, and soft grass, and laughter without reason. And that, Dionysus says, turning to you with sticky hands and sleepy eyes, was the first worship. It wasn't grand. It wasn't organized. There were no rules, no robes, no terrifying statues demanding goats. Just presence, celebration, something in the moss that made your feet dance before your brain gave permission. You linger in that glade for a while. There's no rush. You're surrounded by flute music, babbling brooks, and the smell of pine mixed with fermentation. And that's when the screaming starts. It's subtle at first, like wind through angry reeds. Then louder, a shriek, high and sharp, followed by the unmistakable sound of a nymph throwing a clay pot at something. You turn and see a shadow crawling over the trees. She found me. Dionysus says, Hera's rage is the gift that keeps on giving. You both duck into a hollow log, giggling like fugitives on a field trip. And just before the scene fades, you catch a glimpse of something oddly comforting. Baby Dionysus cradled by the goat, whispering lullabies he hasn't learned yet, while the forest seals itself around them like a womb of leaves. You exhale. It's not a happy childhood. Exactly. But it's his. You're lying flat on a mossy rock now, staring up at the rustling canopy overhead. Sunlight filters through in lazy beams, catching on a breeze thick with sap and goat fur. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs sharp and sudden, followed by the unmistakable sound of a vine slapping something. It shouldn't. The god next to you grins. That's me, probably trying to ride a goat backward again. You glance over at young Dionysus. He's maybe 8, 10. It's hard to tell. Time here drips like honey, not water. He's got a crown of mushrooms, a leaf cape, and a very serious look as he attempts to teach a satyr how to pirouette. The satyr gives up halfway and falls face first into a beehive. You wince. Dionysus applauds. Grace was never the point, he whispers. This part of his childhood, tucked away deep in Nysa, is where the nymphs took over. A cozy conspiracy of caretakers, gentle voices, nimble fingers, and zero interest in sending him off to war school like the other gods. Their favorite activity, teaching him how to sneak snacks into sacred rituals. You haven't lived, Dionysus mutters, until you've replaced a sacrificial bull with a giant cheese wheel and watched the priest pretend it was intentional. Historical accounts often gloss over this period in Dionysus's life, but fringe myth collectors from the 1600s preserved oral stories from shepherds in the Peloponnesus who claimed that their ancestors once stumbled upon a small dancing godlet who could charm bees and summon rain with a hiccup. You're crouched beside a makeshift theater now. A stump stage, acorn seats. The nymphs have gathered for tonight's performance. The tragedy of a lemon that tried too hard. Young Dionysus plays every role hero, villain, and chorus with increasing levels of vine-induced melodrama. He sobs dramatically into a pine cone. The audience is weeping. The goat faints. You wipe a tear from your own cheek. That lemon really did its best. But not everything is play. Between the laughter, there's always tension. You can feel it curling around the edges of the forest like storm clouds that haven't decided if they're angry yet. Hera hasn't stopped hunting. She sends spies snakes, clouds, a very smug-looking owl with glowing eyes. Dionysus grows paranoid. One day, a leaf rustles too loudly and he panics accidentally, transforming a bush into a marble statue. Another time, he creates a thunderstorm that rains only grape juice. The bees are furious. You walk beside him now as he tries to calm down. They keep telling me I'm special, he says, his voice suddenly small. But no one tells me what I'm for. And that, maybe, is the hardest part being a god in a forest where everyone expects you to become something powerful. But no one will say what exactly that looks like. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's early seclusion was an act of protection or preparation. You murmur aloud, almost to yourself. Was he being shielded or simply deferred? He doesn't answer, just kicks a mushroom. Still, the nymphs try their best. They distract him with more games, elaborate picnics, and one particularly memorable wrestling match with a pine tree that ends in him winning, but also accidentally marrying it for 6 minutes. You wander past a meadow where the satyrs are practicing their battle chants. You pause. It's just fart noises and clapping. Satyr military drills. Dionysus says, deadpan. Fearsome stuff. Evening creeps in like spilled ink. The forest glows gold, then blue, then purple, Fireflies blink with musical timing. Somewhere in the distance, a pan flute plays itself to sleep. And just when you think the day is over, Hera strikes again. This time, it's serious. A sickness sweeps through the glade. The nymphs grow silent. The goat lies curled in a shadow that keeps lengthening even when the moon isn't moving. Dionysus kneels beside her, hands shaking, vines unraveling from his wrists like veins. He tries to heal her. Nothing works. You don't want to see this part, but it's part of his story. The first time Dionysus discovers that wine cannot cure everything. That divine blood doesn't stop grief from growing inside you like mold. He buries the goat in a circle of honeycombs and sings something soft, half lullaby, half goodbye. That night, he doesn't sleep. Neither do you. Instead, you follow him as he wanders deeper into the woods, past the last nymph, past the final whisper, into a place no one names. And there, at the edge of the world, a single fig tree stands twisted and patient. Dionysus presses his forehead to its bark and whispers, "If I can't be safe, let me be strange." The bark peels back, a vine slithers out, and just like that, something changes. You both look up. The stars have rearranged themselves. A new constellation hangs overhead somewhere between a goblet and a question mark. Dionysus turns to you, eyes glowing faintly now. "Ready for the next part?" he asks. You nod. Even though you're not, but he's already walking. You trail behind him now, past the fig tree that opened like a sigh, into a place where forests start to thin, and the air picks up a new kind of hum, like strings being tuned in the distance. The stars here hang lower, almost grazing your hair. The grass underfoot smells like crushed mint, and something faintly metallic, like the edge of a memory you've tried to forget. Dionysus walks with new posture, shoulders looser, head tilted, as if listening to music that only exists inside his skull. He looks back at you. "It's time," he says. "I'm going to invent something." You squint. "Like fire, democracy, better." He grins. "Wine." You blink. "Didn't that already exist?" He shrugs. "Not like this." You find yourself in a mountain glade. No shrines, no gods, just wild vines stretching across broken rocks and one extremely smug-looking panther licking its paw beside a wooden press. Dionysus points at it. "That's my tiger." You stare. "That's a panther." It's still a kitten to me." The first batch of wine is an accident. He crushes some grapes between his toes while dancing. A bowl is nearby. It fills. A satyr, too lazy to check for poison, drinks it. 15 minutes later, he's standing on a rock shouting at the moon in Latin, which no one has invented yet. And just like that, the world changes. Mainstream historians credit early winemaking to Neolithic cultures in the Caucasus. But according to this extremely barefoot godchild, they were just following my vibes. He refines the process, learns about aging, oak barrels, aeration, foot temperature. At one point, he holds a very intense seminar on tannins to an audience of goats. One of them takes notes with a stick. You sip a drop of the early stuff. It tastes like confused berries, damp sunlight, and something barely legal in most city-states. That's batch 3. Dionysus says, "Batch 1 turned everyone blue. Batch 2 created bees that quoted poetry. With wine comes celebration, and with celebration music, he builds an entourage. Not priests, not disciples, something weirder. First come the satyrs horned, cloven, terrible at personal space. They play flutes, chase butterflies, and argue about whether or not trees can feel offended. You like them immediately. Then the Maenads, wild-haired women who wear ivy-like jewelry and call thunder just to see if it will answer. They dance in spirals, chant in forgotten dialects, and wrestle dreams into submission. Together, they become his cult, but not in the creepy, tax-exempt kind of way. More like a traveling fever dream with very loose rules and excellent snacks. You march with them. Some nights you sleep under stars. Other nights, you don't sleep at all. You learn songs that don't rhyme and dances that don't end. A satyr teaches you how to light a fire using only sarcasm. Dionysus leads it all, his wine giving courage, confusion, or clarity depending on your mood. Sometimes all three. One night, he throws a pebble into a still lake and it ripples wine. The Maenads strip and jump in. You hesitate, but then a goat cannonballs in beside you. and somehow that settles it. The lake glows. Another night. A group of pirates tries to kidnap Dionysus. It does not go well for them. You watch from behind a barrel as the god smiles sweetly, offers them wine, and waits. They laugh, tie him up, and set sail. Moments later, the ropes fall off on their own. Ivy splits the ship in half, and the pirates, now extremely confused dolphins, leap into the sea with what can only be described as panicked grace. Historians still argue whether this myth is a metaphor for Dionysian liberation or just an ancient warning not to annoy theater kids. You whisper. He winks at you. Same thing, really. Later, when the cult pauses in a coastal village, the locals stare at your group like you've all crawled out of a particularly vivid dream. One man bows, another cries, a third just offers you olives and backs away slowly. Dionysus builds a tiny shrine from seashells and grape stems. He's not asking for power. He's sharing something. Joy, he says one night, swirling a goblet carved from driftwood. That's the only revolution that scares the gods. You believe him. You pass through regions you don't recognize. Forests that flicker like candlelight. Cities that seem to rise and fall overnight, like someone keeps editing the landscape. And through it all, Dionysus keeps moving, drinking, laughing, creating chaos that somehow heals. Fringe scholars once proposed that the god of wine was also the god of memory, simply because his worship seemed to both erase pain and replace it with feeling. Strong, shimmering, wordless feeling. You see it in the way a grieving woman dances beside you like she's learning how to breathe again. In the way a satyr writes a song on his own horns. In the way you forget what day it is and realize it's never really mattered. But not everything is celebration. One evening, as you all camp beside a whispering river, Dionysus finds a child lost in the woods. Her parents were taken by plague. She clutches a broken doll and won't speak. He kneels beside her and offers wine not to drink, but to bathe her hands. She stares, then smiles, just barely. You realize then that his madness is only half the story. The other half is mercy. That night, you sit beside the campfire, dizzy with the day. Dionysus lies in the grass, tracing constellations with a vine. The panther curls at his feet, purring softly. And somewhere in the dark, something laughs that isn't quite human. You don't know it yet, but you're about to meet a donkey. The laughter starts just before dawn. At first, you think it's a satyr with hiccups. Then maybe a nymph choking on a joke no one else heard. But the sound builds louder, sharper, unmistakably nasal. It's the kind of laugh that sounds like it's judging you from a distance and winning. You turn toward the sound and freeze. There, at the edge of the clearing, stands a donkey. Not just any donkey. This one has posture, swagger, eyelashes so long they belong on a Roman fresco, and an amphora of wine strapped to its back like it just walked out of a punchline. Ah! Dionysus groans from beneath a blanket of ivy. He found me. You squint. Friend of yours. Nemesis, Dionysus mutters, and drinking buddy. Onopion. You can't help it. You burst out laughing. Wait, his name is Onopion. It means wine face. He gave it to himself. The donkey steps forward, slow and dramatic, like a gladiator entering a coliseum made of bad decisions. He looks you dead into the eye and brays once a long, operatic note that somehow manages to sound condescending. You back up. He's smaller than you, but somehow also in charge. Dionysus sits up, rubbing his temples. He's been following me since the islands. Claims he's the true patron of fermented joy. Onopion brays again. This time, you hear it clearly. Try me. What follows is less a conversation and more a series of deeply emotional gestures involving ear flicks, tail swishes, and interpretive head tilts. You realize, with growing unease, that you are watching the god argue with a donkey and losing. Historians still argue whether Onopion represents a folk tradition from a forgotten rural cult or was just a practical joke that got out of hand. You whisper. Dionysus groans again. He beat me once. In Naxos, never let it go. You raise a brow. Beat you at what? He hesitates, then sighs. A drinking contest. You choke. A donkey outdrank you. He didn't even get tipsy. Dionysus hisses. He just stared at me, slurped each cup like a connoisseur, mocked my technique. You look over. Onopion is currently dipping his snout into a bowl of rosé with the gravitas of a high court judge. A satyr hands him a second glass. He swirls it, sniffs, brays dismissively. You whisper, "This might be the most powerful creature I've ever met." The Maenads, of course, love him. Within minutes, Onopion has a flower crown, 3 personal attendants, and a reed flute solo composed in his honor. One nymph tries to paint his hooves gold. He kicks over the paint, then poses like it was intentional. You follow Dionysus to the edge of the camp, where he's hiding behind a very tall amphora. "This is my punishment," he mutters, "for hubris, or for turning that shepherd into a wine glass. I don't know anymore." He peers out. Onopion is now reclining on a tapestry, being fanned with laurel branches. I challenged him once more, just to prove I still had it. Dionysus confesses, poured him a goblet. He drank it, poured another. He drank it. I made the wine stronger. He drank it faster. You lean in. What happened? I blacked out somewhere around the 4th round. Woke up in a vineyard, tied to a scarecrow, with a wine-stained toga and a donkey-shaped footprint on my forehead. There's a pause. You both nod, as if that explains everything. Still, Dionysus can't let it go. That night, he hosts a feast, massive spread, oranges from Crete, olives. From Delph. Cheeses aged in song. He calls it a celebration, but you can smell the desperation. The theme, redemption. Onopion arrives fashionably late. Of course, he's wearing earrings. No one knows where he got them. He saunters in, knocks over a bowl of figs, and immediately declares the wine adequate. The satyrs gasp. Dionysus raises a brow. Game night. The donkey flicks his ears. Challenge accepted. You blink, and suddenly you're ringside at the strangest showdown in mythological history. A glowing amphitheater appears from nowhere. The stars crowd in. Even the moon lowers itself slightly for a better view. A table is set. 2 chairs, 1 god, 1 donkey. You take your seat with a clay mug, equal parts excited and terrified. First round, classic red. Dionysus downs his with flair. Onopion sips slowly, mockingly, with a sniff between each taste. Second round, mulled, with cloves and honey. Dionysus chugs it backwards while standing on 1 foot. Onopion nods politely, then belches a 3-part harmony. Third round, wild grape blend, fermented under a solar eclipse. Dionysus sings a song about frogs. Onopion drinks, then eats the cup. You've never seen a creature humiliate a god so politely. Historians still debate whether this scene represents the inversion of social order or just ancient wine-fueled improv. You whisper to yourself. By round 5, Dionysus is swaying, Onopion is flossing. Not dental hygiene, actual dancing. You are witnessing something mythologically ridiculous. By round 7, Dionysus begins reciting obscure sea shanties and crying about an ex-nymph named Doreen. Round 8. Onopion yawns. Round 9. Dionysus tries to toast Zeus, misses, and toasts a pine cone instead. The pine cone thanks him. Round 10. Silence. The god slumps forward. Onopion brays once softly, respectfully, and places a grape gently on Dionysus's forehead like a medal of defeat. The amphitheater erupts in applause. You're crying. From laughter. From beauty. Who knows? Onopion steps off the stage, his hooves barely touching the ground, as if buoyed by pride alone. He passes you, pauses, and gives you a wink, or maybe it's just a twitch. Either way, you are changed. Dionysus snores softly on the table. A Maenad tucks him in with ivy. You sit back, overwhelmed, wine mug trembling in your hand. You whisper, I just watched a donkey win godhood. And somewhere in the distance, a vineyard blooms overnight. You wake to the soft rustle of vines, and a snoring god sprawled across a tapestry soaked in grapeskins and regret. Dionysus is half wrapped in his own ivy crown, his tunic stained with 13 kinds of wine, and at least 2 sauces you can't identify. One of his sandals is hanging from a nearby tree, and someone, probably Onopion, has carefully balanced a fig on his nose. You sit up slowly. Your head is foggy. Your breath smells like fermented poetry, and all around you, the cult is sleeping in odd configurations. A satyr hugging a tambourine like a teddy bear, 3 Maenads snuggled under a table, and Onopion curled like a smug cinnamon roll, dreaming of his victory. You whisper. That happened. Somewhere far off. Thunder rumbles. Not the scary kind, more like an impatient stomach. Dionysus stirs, blinking slowly like a cat emerging from anesthesia. I was robbed, he croaks. You blink. You passed out during round 10. He frowns. Still robbed. You help him up. He groans. You hand him a pear. He throws it at a squirrel. The squirrel catches it and bows. Never drink with a donkey, he mutters. Especially not one that knows your family secrets. The entourage is slow to wake, but eventually the satyrs begin to stretch. The maenads twirl themselves upright, and someone starts a soft beat on a hollowed gourd. It's hangover music, low, slow, slightly judgmental. Dionysus drags himself to the center of the camp. Today, he says, voice gravelly, we walk it off. The crowd groans. You groan louder. And yet off you all go. You trudge through olive groves and across fields of wild thyme. The sun like a watchful eye overhead. Dionysus mutters curses at pebbles. Onopion rides in a cart pulled by satyrs, sipping something that smells like superiority. You ask, where are we even going? To Olympus, Dionysus says, as if the answer is obvious. I need to show face before Apollo tells everyone I lost to a four-legged beverage sponge. You want to ask more, but then you realize the road is changing. Mount Olympus isn't where you thought it'd be. It rises not from geography, but from memory. A sudden shimmer in the air, a column of cloud sculpted into ambition. You pass through a veil of mist and suddenly you're in the middle of a courtyard paved in polished clouds and questionable egos. Welcome to the divine neighborhood. The gods are waiting. Zeus is on his throne, stroking his beard like he invented facial hair. Hera's giving Dionysus the same look she probably gave the Trojan horse, unimpressed, but vaguely threatened. Apollo's leaning against a lyre with his shirt off. As usual, Ares is doing push-ups in the corner. Hermes winks at you, pockets a grape, and disappears. Mainstream historians tend to reduce Olympus to a static council of 12, you murmur. But really, it was more like an eternal family reunion, equal parts opera, courtroom, and soap opera. Dionysus steps forward, still hungover but determined. Good morning, he says, trying to straighten his toga. I come bearing lessons. Hera raises an eyebrow. Zeus thunders. You reek of donkey. That's not a sin. Dionysus mutters. That's a situation. He tries to explain. The festival, the wine, the donkey, the emotional journey. Apollo interrupts. We heard you lost to a livestock. Onopion chooses this exact moment to stroll into the courtyard, a tiny wreath on his head. And bray, what sounds suspiciously like your hair looks better on Hermes. Apollo gasps. Dionysus facepalms. Zeus chuckles, then immediately pretends he didn't. The court explodes into laughter. Even Hera can't suppress a smirk. You're not in trouble, Zeus declares. But you are banned from ambrosia for a week. Dionysus sighs. That's fair. He turns to leave just as Onopion drops a fig at the base of the throne, bows deeply, and struts away. A moment of silence. Then Athena clears her throat and says, Did we just get owned by a donkey? Nobody answers. Back at the camp that night, the mood is oddly serene. Dionysus stares into a fire, sipping grape juice and poking a stick into the embers. I think he insulted Apollo's hair on purpose, he says softly. You nod. It was a pretty sick burn. Historians still argue whether Onopion was a real companion or a dream manifestation of Dionysus's self-doubt. You say aloud. Dionysus doesn't respond. He just smiles. You sit with him a while. The maenads are singing something quiet. The satyrs are curled up like puppies. Onopion snores with theatrical flair, the god of wine and madness. Humbled by a donkey and cheered by chaos, leans back and whispers, I might need to invent naps next. You close your eyes. It's the first time sleep feels like worship. When you open your eyes, you're not entirely sure where you are. The ground beneath you is no longer soft with moss or grape skins. It's dry, cracked, and vaguely suspicious. The sky overhead is blistering blue, the kind that makes your eyes squint even if you're dreaming. Sand crunches under your feet. You hear drums in the distance. Dionysus is already walking ahead, barefoot and smiling like a man who just remembered something he forgot to forget. Asia Minor, he says, or maybe Thrace. Depends who's telling it. You jog to catch up. Why are we here? Pilgrimage. he says. I figured if I can't beat a donkey, I should probably expand the brand. It turns out that when Dionysus goes on tour, it's not subtle. You've joined a slow, lurching caravan of satyrs, maenads, wandering poets, broken flutes, mismatched drums, and one very bored donkey wearing sunglasses made from sea glass and twine. Some days the group marches with purpose. Other days you wander in circles until someone remembers they're supposed to be headed east. Occasionally, a city appears on the horizon. You descend upon it like glittery chaos, throw a festival nobody asked for, and leave the townspeople either blessed, drunk, or gently traumatized. They'll talk about it for centuries. Dionysus says as a confused farmer watches a satyr juggle fish. The cult is growing. More followers join women with haunted eyes, men who speak only in riddles, musicians who can't read music, but can make a liar cry. They bring their own stories, their own griefs, and somehow Dionysus takes it all in stride. Everyone's welcome, he says, as long as they can dance or scream or both. You pause in one town where a local ruler demands the cult disband or face punishment. Dionysus nods solemnly. By morning, the ruler is found tangled in ivy, humming show tunes in an ancient dialect, and claiming he now speaks fluent otter. No one asks questions after that. Mainstream historians often describe Dionysian processions as chaotic rites full of noise, nudity, and altered states. But what they miss is the purpose beneath the madness, the healing, the catharsis. It isn't just about wine, it's about release. You see it in the way a grieving mother screams into the wind, and then laughs for the first time in months. In the way a former soldier dances barefoot until his feet bleed and the past loses its grip. In the way Onopian casually headbutts a corrupt merchant's cart and redistributes all the figs to the crowd. Historians still argue whether these cult rituals were religious ceremonies or ancient group therapy. You whisper to yourself. On day 12, you meet a woman named Melia. She doesn't speak, just carries a jug of wine on her head and watches everything with eyes that seem older than time. She never joins the dancing, never drinks. But every night, when the fires burn low, she sings one soft, haunting note. One note. That's it. And every night, it breaks you a little more gently. Dionysus tells you she once lived in a city where music was banned. They tried to outlaw grief. He says, didn't go well. The caravan moves on. Mountains rise in the distance. You begin the climb with sore legs and blisters on blisters. Onopian rides on a litter carried by satyrs, nibbling on mountain herbs and looking vaguely unimpressed. Dionysus stops midway up a ridge and raises his arms. The wind shifts. Vines sprout from cracks in the rocks. Flowers bloom in crevices. A goat faints with joy. This is not a metaphor. You camp on a ledge that night, staring out over a valley lit by stars so bright they look illegally photoshopped. Dionysus sits beside you, holding a goblet filled with something that glows. Do you think they love me? He asks quietly. You look around at the sleeping cult, the distant fires, the donkey softly snoring in a patch of time. They follow you. You say, even when you don't know where you're going. He nods. Maybe that's the same thing. The next morning, you enter a new city. It's huge, walled, guarded. The gates creak open slowly. You expect resistance. Instead, the high priest bows deeply and presents Dionysus with a crown made of silver ivy. You blink. Wait, they like us. Some places remember. Dionysus says, some forget. Here, the people line the streets with amphorae of wine, baskets of pomegranates, and scrolls filled with poetry written during dreams. You watch as the maenads dance down the main avenue, their shadows flickering against golden stone. You hear drums that don't match each other, but somehow still feel like rhythm. Onopian eats an offering bowl and then blesses a toddler by sneezing on him. The toddler bursts into spontaneous applause. You're dizzy, not from wine this time, but from wonder, from the realization that you've been walking inside a myth for days and somehow it never lost its warmth. That night, Dionysus climbs onto a roof, cup in hand, and sings an ode to mistakes, to lost lovers, to people who trip and never quite stand up the same way again. The city listens. So do you. And somewhere in the dark, the mountain exhales. You don't know how long you'll keep walking. You don't know what comes next. But for now, the madness feels like home. It's been days now, maybe weeks. Time drips like syrup in Dionysus's traveling world. pooling in places, then rushing forward with no warning. You've crossed plains that never end, climbed mountains that weren't there yesterday, and spent one very confusing afternoon stuck in a labyrinth made of flutes. And now, at the edge of a sun-cracked hill, you see him again? Onopion, the donkey. He's wearing a red silk sash. No one knows where he got it. Of course he's back, Dionysus mutters, arms folded. I didn't even send an invitation this time. Onopion brays softly, like he's bored with all of this already. But the cult erupts into applause. Satyrs dance. Maenads rush to crown him with daisies. The donkey raises one eyebrow, accepts a bowl of figs, and proceeds to eat them in the most passive-aggressive way imaginable. You sit beside Dionysus as the donkey is carried on a litter by chanting followers. Is he following us? You ask. He says it's a coincidence. Dionysus growls, but I know better. The cult settles for the night near a dry riverbed. Fires are lit. Wine flows. Someone begins improvising a myth involving onions and divine justice. Onopion listens politely, then kicks a drum over. But tonight feels different. There's a hum in the air. The stars are twitching, like they're trying to rearrange themselves. Dionysus paces the edge of the camp. He's challenging me again. He says flatly. You stare. He hasn't said anything. He never says anything. That's part of the torment. You glance over. Onopion is standing on a hill, backlit by the moon, looking vaguely like a war general about to recite tragic poetry. The wind picks up. His mane flows. You exhale. He does have excellent timing. Dionysus turns. Fine. If he wants a rematch, he'll get one. You blink. Another drinking contest. No, he says. Something worse. The next morning, a makeshift arena is set. It's not like last time. This isn't fun. This is war by performance art. A circle of grapevines marks the edge. Inside, a table, 2 seats. On each plate, a single olive, a crust of bread, and a goblet of wine aged so long it probably remembers the invention of vowels. You sit with the crowd, part curious, part nervous. Dionysus enters first, robes flowing, expression stern. Then Onopion. No robes, just a crown of garlic cloves and a face that says, let's get this over with. The challenge. Not who can drink the most, but who can impress the most while drinking. A battle of style, not substance. Round 1. Dionysus swirls his goblet, recites a poem in reverse, and finishes his wine with a pirouette. The crowd gasps. Onopion takes a slow sip, then places his goblet upside down on his own head without spilling a drop. The crowd screams. Round 2. Dionysus drinks. While juggling 3 live frogs, he winks. One of the frogs croaks the national anthem of an extinct city. Onopion responds by drinking sideways, using a straw made from laurel bark. While stomping a perfect rhythm that turns into a Maenad chant, someone faints. You are not okay. Round 3. Dionysus summons a rain cloud that pours wine. He bathes in it. He monologues about longing. The Maenads weep openly. Onopion slowly sips his wine while drawing a perfect circle in the dust with his hoof inside it. He spells out Nistri. Historians still argue whether this was ritual theater, mockery of divine hubris, or just a very niche talent show. You whisper. By round 5, it's a deadlock. Then Dionysus pulls out the final trick. He drinks, stands, and sings a lullaby so soft, so human, that the crowd forgets to breathe. It's about loss, and mistakes, and waking up in your own mess. It's not divine. It's just real. You glance at Onopion. He's still. Then he does the unthinkable. He walks out of the circle, brays once, and bows. The crowd doesn't cheer. They just stare confused, reverent, moved. Dionysus lowers his goblet. What just happened? You don't know. No one does. Later, back at the fire, Onopion lies beside a log, watching the stars. Dionysus sits nearby. They don't speak, but something has shifted. He let me win, Dionysus says. You glance at the donkey, who blinks slowly and sneezes on a pine cone. Historians still argue whether that night marked a surrender, a truce, or simply a donkey getting bored. You whisper. But to you, it feels like something else entirely. Not victory, not loss, just understanding. As the stars blink softly above, Dionysus lies back and sighs. I still hate him. he says, but he's smiling. You pull your blanket closer and watch as the donkey dreams hooves twitching, tail flicking at invisible nonsense. And for the first time in days, you sleep without dreaming. You wake to silence, not the peaceful kind, the strange kind, the kind of silence that presses against your ears like someone just whispered, shh. Across the universe, the camp is empty. No maenads twirling, no sahirs arguing over breakfast figs, no singing, no drums, just you, the ashes of a fire, and a donkey chewing grass like nothing happened. You glance around, then you hear it. A soft moan from beneath a blanket of grape leaves. Dionysus. He stirs, eyes half closed, hair an elegant mess of sticks and questionable decisions. What day is it? He groans. You hesitate. Festival day. He bolts upright. Oh no. Apparently, there's a schedule. And apparently, Dionysus was supposed to be presiding over a very important ritual in a city-state whose name you can't pronounce and whose priests are not known for their patience. You scramble. The cult is gone, scattered on scouting missions, which you now realize is code for we forgot the calendar again. Onopion is the only one on time. He's already packed, groomed, and wearing a ceremonial ribbon tied around his tail. I swear he does this just to mock me. Dionysus mumbles, trying to wrap himself in a robe while still half asleep. The two of you set off alone, hiking through hills that smell like toasted rosemary and ambition. Dionysus walks barefoot, holding a gourd of wine and mumbling lines from a hymn he hasn't quite memorized. You arrive at the city just before noon. The gates open slowly. A single priest greets you. He's tall, stern, and shaped like someone who has never missed a morning scroll reading. He eyes Dionysus, then Onopion, then you. Where is the retinue? The priest asks. Dionysus smiles, lost to divine revelation. The priest blinks, and the sacrificial goat, Onopion, steps forward. The priest pales. The temple is grand columns of marble, golden braziers, a statue of Dionysus himself carved during his serious phase. It looks nothing like him. He whispers to you, I had a cold that week. The ceremony begins. The priests chant. Incense curls like cautious questions. Dionysus is handed a golden ladle and asked to bless the ceremonial amphora. He dips it with flair. He pours. He sips and winces. This wine is awful, he stage whispers. The priests freeze. You sniff it. They've accidentally used vinegar. Onopion, of course, walks forward, samples it, and brays in what is unmistakably pity. The head priest turns red. We may have miscalculated. He stammers. Dionysus leans in. I'm the god of wine, he says gently. Not soup. He walks past the altar, straight to the statue, and without warning plucks a cluster of grapes from a tray and squishes them in his hand. The Jew strips down the pedestal. Then he does it again. The crowd murmurs. Then he holds the juice up to the sky and speaks not in Greek, not in words, you know, but in a tone that vibrates something deep in your chest. Something shifts. The grapes on the trays begin to ripple, then split, then bubble with wine, sweet and wild, and somehow sad. You smell strawberries, thunder, and a little homesickness. He's not angry. He's reminding them. The festival erupts. People pour into the temple. Music crashes in from nowhere. Wine flows like guilt in a family reunion. Satyrs return out of thin air. Maenads tumble in from balconies. A band of flute players appears mid-note like they've been playing since time began. Even the statue starts to sweat rosé. You're pulled into the crowd, spinning, laughing, covered in olive oil and bad decisions. Someone hands you a mask shaped like a duck. You don't ask why. You put it on. Onopion is leading a conga line of toddlers. One of them is chanting his name like a spell. At one point, a priest collapses in ecstasy, and Dionysus catches him just barely and whispers, breathe through it. Buddy, it's not just chaos. It's release. Mainstream historians often downplay these festivals as debauched rural rituals, but they miss the fact that these moments were sacred. They weren't about control. They were about undoing what was too tightly wound. Historians still argue whether Dionysian rites were psychological tools or metaphysical acts of rebellion. You murmur, tipsy and barefoot, and possibly covered in honey. At dusk, the last song ends. The temple is littered with petals, sandals, and one extremely confused goat. Dionysus sits beside the statue, head leaning against its foot. That went better than I expected. You nod. That was chaos. He grins. Chaos is underrated. Onopion curls up on a mosaic floor, completely unbothered by everything. A crown of basil on his head. The priest approaches quietly. We will rebuild the winepress properly with assistance. Dionysus nods. And maybe taste test next time. The priest nods solemnly. Yes, that seems wise. As the stars blink awake, you lie back against a cracked pillar, the stone still warm from the day's madness. Dionysus hums something old. Onopion flicks his ears, and for one perfect moment, everything is still. No rules, no fear, just a god, a donkey, and a day well ruined. You leave the city at sunrise, sandals sticky with temple wine and glitter. You can't explain. Dionysus hums a tune that never resolves. He's got olive leaves in his hair and a slight bruise on his shoulder from dancing too close to an enthusiastic lyre solo. He says, Onopion walks ahead, tail swishing like a metronome, carrying a bundle of unsolicited temple gifts in a basket strapped to his back. The road stretches out before you, dusty, golden, humming with hangover wisdom. You ask, where to now? Dionysus doesn't even look up. Olympus, you groan? Again, he nods. I have to apologize to Apollo. Apparently, the donkey said something about his bangs. You think about objecting, but then you remember the look on Apollo's face the last time you saw him, right? Yes, damage control. The climb is long. The higher you go, the more the trees begin to look judgmental. The clouds thicken into suspicious glances. At one point, Hera sends a peacock to check in. It glares at Dionysus for 10 full minutes. Before vanishing in a puff of pride, you arrive at the gates of Olympus with twigs in your robes and two Maenads clinging to each other, still giggling from a joke told 6 hours ago. Apollo meets you at the steps. He's radiant, of course, fresh tunic, perfect curls, a subtle glow that smells like sun-warmed citrus and misplaced envy. His expression is neutral. His lyre is glowing. Dionysus steps forward. I come in peace, with wine. Apollo raises an eyebrow, and with him, he nods at Onopion. The donkey brays once. It sounds a lot like, nice sandals. Apollo winces. You hold your breath. Then, slowly, Apollo chuckles. Oh, Dion, he sighs. Only you would bring a rude donkey to an apology. He brings himself. Dionysus mutters, I have zero control. Apollo waves you all in. The other gods are already assembled, lounging like an immortal panel of judges. Athena's taking notes. Ares is doing bicep curls with a marble bust. Artemis is sharpening arrows with a butter knife. You're ushered into the Hall of Echoes, a room that repeats every sound at the worst possible moment. You try not to speak. Zeus watches as Dionysus approaches the dais. Let me guess. The thunder god booms. You've come to explain the rumors. Dionysus lifts his goblet in salute. I have come to explain nothing and take full responsibility. Zeus pauses. Well, that's unexpected. But, Dionysus adds, I will clarify that I did not start the chant about Hera's sandals. The hall echoes. Hera's sandals. 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 Hera's eyes narrow. Anyway, Dionysus says quickly, it was a beautiful ceremony. Mostly, I may have knocked over a statue on purpose for symbolic reasons. He then hands Zeus a bottle of the temple's resurrected wine, thick, dark, humming slightly. Zeus uncorks it, sniffs, takes a sip, and smiles. Acceptable, he rumbles. That's basically a divine blessing. But then things go sideways. Onopion, ever the opportunist, wanders toward the central pedestal, the one that holds Olympus's official scroll of divine hierarchy, and very calmly eats half a corner of it. Apollo screams. Hermes dives to save the rest. Athena gasps. That's an original. Zeus just sighs. Onopion stares straight ahead, chewing slowly, unapologetically. He brays, tastes like insecurity. Dionysus face palms. You consider hiding under the nearest table. Historians still argue whether this moment was a mythological prank, a political statement, or simply the result of letting a donkey into heaven. You whisper. Eventually, the tension breaks thanks to Hermes pulling a perfect imitation of Zeus's voice, ordering everyone to take a nap. Zeus is not amused, but he's also slightly tipsy. The gods disperse. Artemis mutters something about mortals being more fun. Athena leaves muttering equations. Apollo sulks for 3 whole minutes before composing a song called Betrayed by a Beast. You and Dionysus retreat to his cloud balcony, a private corner with a bottomless amphora and a perfect view of Earth below. He pours you both a drink. "Do you think I'm a joke to them?" he asks softly. You pause. They laugh. You say, but they also listen. He nods. Sometimes the loudest gods are just trying to distract from the silence. He looks at you for a moment, then laughs not his usual wine-splashed cackle, but something gentler. "You've been around me too long." You clink cups. Onopion trots over and curls up at your feet. He's tired. His ears twitch. For once, he doesn't bray. You watch the clouds shift. Below, the earth turns slowly. Cities flicker. Mountains exhale. Vineyards glow like embers waiting for harvest. You exhale. It feels good to stop, even just for a moment. You don't stay on Olympus for long. Divinity, it turns out, gets old quickly. Too much marble. Too many rules. Too many gods with perfect hair and opinions on toga lengths. Dionysus agrees. They get itchy if nothing explodes for more than 24 hours. So you leave. Again, this time, it's not a cult or a parade. It's just the 3 of you. You, Dionysus, and Onopion, a trio of wanderers with questionable priorities and a wineskin that never empties. You find yourselves in a region heavy with damp forests and mushroom-covered hills. The roads are quiet. The people are quieter. They watch you from behind curtains and carved wooden doors. You'd think you were ghosts, if not for the faint smell of stew and suspicion in the air. Something's off. Dionysus mutters, "This place is too sober." He's not wrong. You visit a town called Myrtakos. No music, no laughter. The tavern serves water, still water. A musician strums a lyre in the square but stops every few notes to apologize. Dionysus looks genuinely concerned. "Did I miss a law? Is joy illegal now?" You learn quickly. The town worships a minor goddess named Lytis, the Lady of Restraint. She once declared that emotions are contagious and must be contained like plagues. Her followers wear gray. They sip broth. They whisper. It's a deeply unfun place. So, of course, Dionysus decides to stay. He opens a pop-up wine stall the next morning. No license, no permission, just a crate, a tablecloth that smells like regret, and a jug of something that glows faintly when you insult it. By noon, he's banned. By evening, half the village is drunk. By midnight, the musicians are playing something that sounds suspiciously like a rebellious jig. A child is dancing. Someone has tied tiny bells to a goat. By morning, the town square is empty again, covered in petals and half-finished songs. The Lady of Restraint's temple door is padlocked, and a notice is pinned to it. Temple closed for re-sanctification. Please contain yourselves. Dionysus grins. Progress. You travel on, through whispering valleys and moaning woods, into cities that look like they've forgotten what celebration feels like. Then King Midas. You arrive in his city after dusk. Gold gleams on every surface. The walls, the statues, even the flowers. But no one smiles. The people move like wind-up toys, precise, pale, afraid to touch anything. The market smells like dust and old coins. You meet Midas in his golden hall. He's tall, polished, and miserable. "Everything I touch," he says, "becomes treasure." You nod. That sounds exhausting. He turns to Dionysus. "Can you fix me?" Dionysus stares at him, then walks over, picks up a golden goblet, and licks it. Midas flinches. "Still tastes like shame," Dionysus mutters. He agrees to help, but not in the way Midas expects. That night, you gather in a meadow just outside the city. Dionysus builds a fire. Onopion sleeps beside a log, dreaming of chewing through someone's wine list. Midas kneels awkwardly in the grass, still gold from the knees down. Dionysus begins chanting, not loudly, not dramatically, just persistently. The words are older than weather. They don't rhyme, They don't explain, but they shift the air. You watch as a mushroom grows beside Midas's foot, then another. Then the gold starts to flake, slowly, like tree bark shedding in spring. The golden touch begins to melt away. Midas sobs. The next morning, his palace looks duller, but warmer. He touches his daughter's hair. She doesn't turn into a statue. She hugs him. The servants exhale. Historians still argue whether Dionysus cured Midas out of mercy or boredom. You murmur, but in that moment, it doesn't matter. Midas offers Dionysus a chest of treasure. Dionysus refuses. Onopion eats half a gold coin and spits it out like it was offensively bland. As you walk away, Midas calls after you. What do I owe you? Dionysus smiles over his shoulder. Just remember how good it feels to not be shiny. You keep walking. The roads get stranger. One day, you find mushrooms the size of umbrellas. Another. You wake up to find the forest speaking in rhymes. Dionysus listens carefully. They're composing. He whispers, "It's a new season." You stay in a town where it rains honey. Then a village where the moon never rises, and people light candles on their hats instead. Dionysus drinks wine that tastes like snow. Onopion invents a new insult using only hoof gestures. One night, in the middle of a field of wild fennel, Dionysus turns to you. "Do you think I'm making anything better?" You pause. "You're making things feel again." He smiles, but it's tired. "I don't want to fix the world," he murmurs. "Just loosen it." You lie back in the fennel and stare at the stars. They blink at you like shy gods. You fall asleep to the sound of Dionysus humming and Onopion softly chewing a map you probably needed. And in the morning, everything smells like basil and second chances. By the time you reach the edge of the next city, something in the air feels off. The wind blows warm but tight. The sky is clear, but the light feels flat, like someone turned down the saturation. Dionysus squints at the horizon, frowns, and doesn't say a word for the next 10 minutes. You arrive at the gates of a marble city you don't remember from any map. It's quiet, too quiet, no music, no vendors, no pigeons arguing over breadcrumbs. And then you see them, the goddesses, not the ones you've heard of, not Aphrodite or Hera or Artemis. These are the other ones? The ones you never quite remember, whose temples crumbled first. The ones who didn't get epics, only footnotes. Who are they? You whisper. Dionysus sighs. The boring ones. You glance again. There's a goddess of moderation, adjusting the same fruit bowl over and over. A goddess of seasonal accounting, who looks like she's been waiting 6 centuries to file something. And one who might be the patron of passive-aggressive silences. They watch you enter. They don't move. Then one of them speaks, her voice thin, stretched, like paper tearing. "You're not welcome here." Dionysus, he bows. "Ladies, how you've endured." Another speaks. "We remember when joy was quiet, when gods didn't wear leopard skins and sing with goats." Dionysus straightens. "And I remember when people weren't afraid of being seen." You follow him through the city. Everything here feels stifled, like laughter has been outlawed. The streets are clean, too clean. A satyr sneezes and is immediately asked to leave. "They banned singing," Dionysus says, barely hiding a grin. "Even in the bathrooms. The people here are pale and polite. They nod as you pass. No eye contact. You ask for directions. They smile sadly and say, "It's better if you don't." Onopion is completely unbothered. He trots into the public square and immediately topples a stack of scrolls with one kick. Gasps. A child laughs. Immediately silenced by an elder who looks like he was carved from beige clay. You arrive at the Temple of Graceful Limitation, the city's main shrine. Inside, an altar carved with scenes of quiet dinners and mildly approving nods. Dionysus steps forward and addresses the priestesses. "I'm not here to start a riot." They stare at him. He continues, "I just want to recalibrate your definition of joy." You cough. "That does sound like you're going to start a riot." A hush falls. Then one of the goddesses appears, tall, elegant, draped in linen so beige it might legally be considered transparent to the human spirit. Her eyes are the color of dusty chalk. Her presence is like a polite rejection letter. "You bring corruption," she says softly. Dionysus bows. "I bring fermentation." She circles him. Slow, Precise. You leave messes, I leave flavor. You infect order. He grins. I invent movement. She raises a hand. You will not unbalance us. The floor begins to ripple beneath your feet, stone curling like parchment. A tremor in the air. You feel your ears pop. And then snakes, dozens of them, slithering from under the altar, not threatening, not hissing, just writhing, rhythmically, like a dance too old to name. The priestesses gasp. Dionysus says nothing. He watches. The snakes coil around his legs. They don't bite. They sing. It's not in words. It's in pressure, in memory, in sensations. Moss under your feet, fingers running through wine. The joy of being carried by a crowd you trust, and then they vanish. The goddess blinks. For the first time, you see something crack in her face. Not fear, not anger, loneliness. You were one of us once, she says quietly. I still am. Dionysus replies, you just stopped dancing. The other goddesses appear, drifting in like smoke. They don't argue, they don't cry, they just nod. Barely. That night, the city changes. Not wildly, not quickly, but enough. Someone sings softly on a balcony. Two old men begin to argue, then laugh. A child paints ivy on a column in bright green. You walk through the streets with Dionysus. No music this time, just the sound of a city remembering how to breathe. Historians still argue whether this encounter was myth, metaphor, or a cautionary tale about over-organizing festivals. You whisper. He grins. Sometimes all three. Onopian choose a street map someone spent 10 years illustrating. You sleep in a tiny inn, run by a woman who offers you a pillow made of wild fennel and goose feathers. You dream of soft tambourines and moonlight tangled in vines. The next morning, a shrine has been built. Not to Dionysus, to joy. It's small, no gold, just a cup of wine and a ribbon tied to a goat's horn. He smiles. You move on. You wake up in a field of thorns. Well, not real thorns, dried fennel stalks, twisted and sharp, reaching out from the earth, like memories that won't stay buried. The wind hisses through them, carrying something that sounds like a melody but bites like regret. Dionysus is already standing, arms outstretched, his robes missing one sleeve. His feet are bare. There's dried wine on his chin. This is it, he whispers. We've reached the edge. The edge of what? You ask, climbing to your feet. He doesn't answer, just walks. You follow. The landscape shifts quickly, grass to stone, stone to ash, ash to something that might be bone. No signs, no towns, no temples, just a circle of worn earth ahead, pulsing faintly under a crooked moon. You've arrived at the ritual site. You've heard whispers of this place Sparagmos, a rite rarely spoken aloud. Even the gods step carefully here. The followers gather slowly, Maenads first, barefoot and wild-eyed, wreaths of thistle in their hair. Satyrs stumble in behind them, unusually sober. Even Onopion keeps his distance, hooves clicking on the brittle soil. The mood is different. There's no laughter, no singing, just breath. And the low hum of anticipation. Dionysus steps into the center of the circle. Tonight, it's not about wine, or joy, or mischief. Tonight, it's about ecstasy, the kind that strips you down to nothing. That tears through the walls you didn't know you'd built. A drum begins, slow, then faster. The Maenads chant in an ancient tongue. You don't understand it, but your skin does. It crawls. The rite of Sparagmos, historians say, was symbolic, ritualized madness, controlled dismemberment of meaning, a tearing away of the false self. Fringe scholars argue it was literal, that animals, or in darker rumors, people were torn apart in a frenzy of devotion. Historians still argue whether Sparagmos was spiritual catharsis or divine psychosis. You whisper to yourself, Dionysus doesn't speak. He just moves. The dance starts slow, fingertips grazing the air, hips swaying like wind through vines. But it builds fast, too fast, like the music has its own pulse. And it's hunting you. A Maenad screams, not in pain, in release. Another spins so hard her feet barely touch the earth. A satyr tears off his sash and hurls it into the fire. Sparks explode. The air is thick with sweat, incense, and something older, something hungry. You're in the middle now. You don't remember stepping in, but you're here, dancing, shaking, moving in ways that aren't yours. Your hands tingle. Your mouth tastes like iron and thunder. Dionysus is everywhere, his face flickering in every torch, his voice in every breath. And then, you see it, not with your eyes, but with something else. A creature, bound in vines, made of shadows and mirrors. It shifts every time you try to name it. Shame, memory, loneliness, rage, the thing you carry, the thing you hide. The crowd circles it. Dionysus raises a hand, and they tear it apart, not with violence, but with truth. They name it, out loud, over and over, each voice louder, each syllable a blade. It shrieks and vanishes. The circle collapses. The music ends. Silence. Then sobbing. Then laughter. Then nothing at all. You drop to your knees. The earth is warm. Onopion approaches quietly and nudges your shoulder. He offers a fig. You take it. Dionysus kneels beside you. His eyes are glassy, not drunk clear. For the first time, you see him without the haze. You okay? He asks. You nod. What was that? He tilts his head. Whatever you needed it to be. The Maenads lie in the grass, tangled in each other's arms. The satyrs curl beside logs, humming lullabies to themselves. One nymph is carving a poem into the dirt with her fingernail. The stars have never felt so close. You breathe. It doesn't hurt. Later, as the fire dies, Dionysus takes your hand and leads you away from the circle. Not to leave, just to walk. The world is quiet. Not dead. Not asleep. Just still. He looks at you. Sparagmos isn't about violence. He says, it's about truth. About stripping away everything that isn't you. You think about that. You think about all the versions of yourself you've performed for the world, for your family, for the gods. And here, under this sky, after that dance, you feel like none of them matter anymore. You are breath. You are body. You are here. You are enough. You wake before the sun. The fire is only embers now, glowing like sleepy eyes across the ritual site. The others are still wrapped in silence, Maenads, sprawled like exhausted constellations, satyrs tangled in their own limbs, and Onopion with a blanket over his head, and one hoof sticking straight into the air like he's making a point in his dreams. Dionysus is already up. He sits on a rock at the edge of the clearing, watching the stars fade, sipping from a wooden cup like it's a secret he hasn't decided whether to tell. You walk over and sit beside him. The earth smells like fennel smoke and wet ash. You good? He asks. You nod, then pause. What happens after all that? He shrugs. Usually naps, sometimes poems. Once, we got very into yodeling for about 3 hours. You smile. But there's something heavy hanging between you now. Not bad, not dangerous, just inevitable. Dionysus exhales. You know why I invented naps? You raise an eyebrow. I thought it was because of too much wine. Nope. He says, it was because the world started expecting me to be on all the time. Festivals, miracles, transformations. They wanted joy like it was a faucet I could turn on. He looks out across the quiet field. I got tired. He leans back, legs stretched in front of him, cup resting on his chest. So, I made naps sacred. I told the cult that sleep was a ritual, that if you rested hard enough, you could meet gods in your dreams. You squint. Can you? Probably not, he says, but it gave everyone a reason to lie down. And once you lie down, you remember your body isn't just a transportation device, it's home. You let that settle. He closes his eyes. Even gods need to disappear sometimes. The day unfolds slowly. No wild music, no frenzy. Just quiet tasks, rebraiding hair, washing fruit in the river, writing half-remembered dreams in the dirt with sticks. Someone is sewing a new sash from leftover grape skins. Onopion tries to eat it. Dionysus lies in a hammock made of ivy, surrounded by satyrs fanning him with palm leaves they absolutely did not find in this biome. You walk past the ritual site. It's just a circle now. No snakes, no voices, just footprints and overturned stones. You think about what you left behind there. What was torn away? A fear, a grudge, a performance you didn't even know you were still doing. And in its place, breath. Later, Dionysus wakes from his nap and joins you by the river. He scoops water with his hands, lets it run through his fingers. Did you know, he says, the first wine wasn't made in a vineyard. You shake your head. He smiles. It was an accident. A jug of crushed grapes left in the sun. Forgotten. Sour. But then, alive. You look at him. Most beautiful things, he says, start by being forgotten. You sit together in the shallows, feet in the water. The river hums against your skin like a lullaby. Around dusk, a soft wind stirs. The others gather their things. No one speaks, but you all know it's time to move again. The cult doesn't need a leader today. It just follows the rhythm. Feet to earth. Hands to hands. You walk in spirals until the path finds you. Dionysus stops halfway up a ridge, looks back. He doesn't speak, but you know he's seeing something. Maybe all the places he's been, or all the people he's held until they could walk again. Or maybe he's just counting clouds. You ask, do you ever want to stay somewhere? He tilts his head. I do stay, he says, just not always in the same place. You realize he's not talking about geography. He keeps walking. And you follow. That night, you camp in a fig grove where the trees lean inward like they're whispering secrets to each other. The moon is full. The ground is soft. Someone has left offerings a bowl of olives, a comb made of bone, a torn poem tied to a branch with string. Dionysus settles in beside the fire, Onopion at his feet. The donkey is snoring softly, ears twitching like he's dreaming of judgmental temple priests. You stretch out on your blanket, gaze up at the stars, and for the first time, you understand something. Dionysus isn't a god because of his power. He's a god because he knows what it's like to burn out, to rebuild yourself from ash, to turn pain into movement, grief into rhythm, loneliness into wine. He knows what you're carrying and he lets you set it down. So, you do. You fall asleep with the taste of fennel and fig on your tongue, and the sound of Dionysus humming something old and half-forgotten into the night. Tomorrow will come, but tonight, you rest. You wake to the sound of Onopion trying to steal someone's breakfast figs again. It's almost comforting. The sun is already slanting through the fig trees, warm and dappled. The leaves above you whispering like old friends exchanging gossip. You stretch, bones soft, breath easy, heart steady. Dionysus is sitting by the fire, half covered in a blanket, chewing on something that might be a date. Or might be someone's leftover hair ornament. He sees you and grins. You made it. To where? You ask, rubbing your eyes. He shrugs. Here. And that's when you realize there is no destination. There never was. Just moments strung together like olive pits on a thread, each one pungent and strange and surprisingly sacred. Today is quiet, no rituals, no festivals, just packing up, sharing food, laughing in small, honest bursts. Someone's trying to teach a satyr how to fold a blanket. It's not going well. Onopion, crowned again in wildflowers he probably did not ask for, trots ahead to scout the trail. He stops at a hilltop and stares into the distance. You climb up next to him. Below you lies Thebes, gleaming walls, crumbling temples, 1,000 rooftops blinking in the morning light. But something stands out. Near the city gates, a statue. You blink. It's a donkey, rearing proudly on its hind legs, mouth mid-bray, a fig clenched triumphantly between its teeth. Dionysus joins you, arms crossed, staring down at it. No way. You say, oh, yes way. He groans. They made him a hero. Onopion brays softly, deeply satisfied. You don't speak fluent donkey, but it feels like about time. A plaque at the base reads, to the one who humbled the god, in wine and wisdom. Dionysus shakes his head. I lose one drinking game one, and suddenly he's a legend. You grin. You did pass out during round 10. Technicality, he mutters. He cheated. You glance at the statue again. He didn't even have hands. Exactly. Dionysus says, deadpan. Very suspicious. You walk with him into the city. No trumpets, no guards, just people nodding, offering fruit, lighting incense at tiny shrines where laughter is the only prayer. Inside the city, there's a courtyard where grapes grow up the walls and children chase each other with painted ivy crowns. A group of elders sits beneath a fig tree debating whether the god of madness once turned a river into marmalade. One insists it was apricot jam. A mural covers the temple wall. Dionysus dancing with a tiger on one side, passed out next to Onopion on the other. He sighs. You tell people stories. They turn them into reputations. You ask, which part bothers you more? He grins that they remembered the nap. As the sun lowers, the city prepares for a festival, not in his honor, just because music swells, wine pours, children sing songs that rhyme donkey with honestly. You help hang lanterns. Dionysus is dragged into a dance he pretends to hate but clearly enjoys. Onopion gets a golden halter and a reserved seat near the olives. No miracles, no chaos, just joy. And as the sky turns violet, Dionysus sits beside you on the temple steps, hair mussed, eyes soft. They don't need me anymore, he says quietly. Maybe that's the point, you reply. He nods. Joy isn't something you own. You just uncork it. He clinks his goblet against yours. Later, as the fire crackles and laughter drifts through the streets like perfume, you look at him, truly look, and see someone who's no longer trying to prove anything, just being. And you feel different, too. Like someone loosened the knots inside your chest. Like your shadow learned to dance. You lie back, watching lanterns float into the sky, and wonder what ridiculous myth they'll make out of this night. Then again, maybe none. Maybe this one's just for you. The sky softens. The last echoes of music fade into the corners of the night, folding gently into the dark. You lie still, head resting against warm stone, the scent of figs and wine still clinging to the breeze. Somewhere nearby, Dionysus hums not a song, just a sound. Like someone remembering something good without needing words. You hear Onopion snoring softly. Even his dreams have quieted. Your body is warm and heavy, your thoughts slowing like a river easing into still water. Nothing left to chase, nothing left to tear apart. Just the hum of the earth beneath you, and the breath of a god who knows when to speak and when to stop. The world turns, and you float with it. Held, not because of who you are or what you've done, but simply because you are here. And that's enough. Let your eyes drift. Let the night carry you. You are safe. You are tired. You are loved by the God who gave you permission to feel again. Sleep. Now, we'll find our way back when the vines bloom again.